recording, please. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. My name is Andrew Johnson, and I'm an analyst at the Oregon Department of Energy. Thank you all for joining us today. In a moment, we'll have the staff introduce themselves from the Oregon Department of Energy and ask participants to introduce themselves in the chat. For those joining by phone, you will not need to identify yourself, but please remember to state your name and your organization if you wish to provide comments during the comment period at the end of the meeting. And just one quick thing about the chat function. You can find the chat option at the bottom right-hand corner of the screen. And so as staff introduce themselves, participants, please start to introduce yourselves in the chat. Please state your name, your organization, and whether you would like to provide comments at the end of the call. Please hold your comments until the end of the meeting. However, if you have a clarifying question, feel free to add it in the chat and we'll try to answer as we go. So we'll now have the ODO staff introduce themselves. Duard, why don't you get us started?
Sure. Good morning, everyone. I'm Duard Headley. I'm the Energy Incentives Manager at the Oregon Department of Energy. So I manage the heat pump program, solar plus storage, CRUP, and some of the federal programs like the HP3 program as well. And I'll pass things to Kayla.
Thanks, Stuart. Hi, everyone. I'm Caitlin Lynch. I'm an energy incentive policy analyst here at ODO, mainly working on our heat pump incentive programs. And I'll pass to Kayla.
Thank you. I'm Kayla. I'm an incentive analyst and I work on the Oregon Rental Home Heat Pump Program. And I've also been helping start up this program that I'm excited to share more information about, or Andrew's excited to share information about. I'm excited to help with the chat. And I'll go ahead and pass it to Sarah.
Hi all, my name is Sarah Murky. I'm the community navigator with the strategic engagement team here at ODO. So I support tribal, rural, and coastal communities in accessing federal and state resources. Thanks for having me. Oh, I'm sorry. I'll pass it to Darcy.
Thanks, Sarah. My name is Darcy Hecker. I am the division assistant with the Energy Development Services team. And I think we got everybody, Andrew?
I think so, yeah. Just a couple of additional things about WebEx. I mentioned the chat function. We also have the reactions function at the bottom of the page. If you'd like to raise your hand, you can click on the reactions function at the bottom, or there's also an option to the right of your name in the chat if you'd like to raise your hand. If you have a clarifying question, feel free to raise your hand during the presentation. If you have comments, please wait until the end of the meeting. And one thing about if folks are on the phone, you can use *3 to raise your hand. So why don't we go ahead and take a quick look at the agenda for today. We're going to review the program background and overview, talk a little bit about the differences between the new program HP3 and the existing rental home heat pump program, talk about requirements for contractor registration and requirements for the incentive application and key program dates. And then finally, we'll have hopefully quite a bit of time to answer additional questions and hear your comments and feedback about the program. So a little background about the funding. The US EPA awarded the Oregon Department of Energy a $24 million climate pollution reduction grant for heat pump incentives through a sub-grant from the Oregon Department of Environmental Quality. And ODO received this grant in part due to the established and successful heat pump incentive programs that we currently administer. I'm sure these are familiar to many of you, the Community Heat Pump Deployment Program, also known as CHIP-DIP, which provides incentives for homeowners, and the Oregon Rental Home Heat Pump Program, which provides incentives to property owners of rentals and owners of manufactured homes in a rented space. The incentives will be delivered through this new program that we're calling the Heat Pump Purchase Program, or HP3 for short. And the target program start date is this spring. So the new program will provide 12,000 incentives of $2,000 each, 6,000 incentives for rental units, 4,000 incentives for new residential construction, including new rental units, and 2,000 incentives for owner-occupied homes. There is a limit of 1 incentive per dwelling, and the incentive will be applied for by contractors after installation. The incentives can be stacked with other other non-federal incentives, including energy trust and local utility incentives. Some key points on project eligibility. The heat pump must be purchased on or after the program start date. The heat pump must be purchased from an ODO approved contractor. Must include a 5-year manufacturer's warranty, be new, and provide heating and cooling for a living area of the home. Commercial properties are not eligible, and the other requirements can be found in the draft HP3 policies. That document is up on the HP3 webpage, and please, when you get a chance, take a look. As we'll mention throughout this meeting, you can provide written comments to us as well, and we'll provide an email address at the end of the call. So the program process, and I think this will be very familiar to the contractors participating in the Oregon Rental Home Heat Pump Program, and also many of you who have participated in the program in one way or another. So the contractor registers for the program, and if you are an existing Oregon Rental Home Heat Pump Program contractor, you will not need to register again. If you are a contractor that's not an approved contractor, you will need to register. The heat pump is purchased and installed in an eligible residence. The contractor submits the incentive application to ODO. The incentive application is approved or denied, and then you can reapply if you're denied due to being an incomplete application. I imagine the contractors will be familiar with the existing program and with our simplified requirements for this program. So, probably the most common reason for denial will just be an incomplete application, and you'll be able to resubmit. And finally, when the application is approved, we will send the $2,000 incentive directly to the contractor, similar to the Oregon Rental Home Heat Pump Program. Darcy, do we have any clarifying questions so far?
Not right now.
Okay, thank you. So I'd like to spend a little more time on this slide. This compares the new program with the Oregon Rental Home Heat Pump Program. We took lessons learned from the Oregon Rental Home Heat Pump Program and applied them to the new program. And in doing so, I think we've greatly simplified the incentive application process, which I know was a bit complicated and time consuming for most. And so one big difference between the existing program and the new program is that you will apply once for the incentive after installation, rather than reserving before installation and then claiming after installation. Also, we will have a cap of 100 incentives per contractor within a 100-day period, whereas we had no limit on reservations per contractor in the Oregon Rental Home Heat Pump Program. We received a lot of feedback, especially during the last round, that some folks weren't able to access the incentives. And so in order to spread the incentives around to everybody who would like to apply, we've decided to add a cap on the number of incentives per contractor. The incentive amount, as I mentioned, is $2,000 per heat pump purchase, whereas in the past we had rebates of $2,000 to $7,000 and grants from $2,000 to $4,000. So there will be a lower rebate amount, no grants available with this new program. And I'll pause there and see if we have any questions so far. Any clarifying questions?
Andrew, there are a couple in the chat.
I've got a couple of hands up as well.
Okay.
I'm going to go ahead and unmute Jenna. Jenna, go ahead with your question.
Can you hear me? Thank you. I just had a question about the reservation versus applying after the fact. How will a contractor be able to guarantee that there'll be a rebate if they can't reserve the funds beforehand?
Andrew, you want me to take that one?
Yeah, you can go ahead and take that.
So, Darcy, can you actually advance to the backup slide that we put together for this specific question? As you know, within the rental home heat pump program, when we opened up the last round of funding, that $4,000, actually it was $5,000 or $5 million was reserved in less than 48 hours, and that reservation process is really what resulted in all of those funds being able to be consumed that quickly. Since this process is one where you will apply after the rebate, the $24 million that are available in this program will be reserved at a much lower rate. So we're expecting that these funds will be available over a period of years, as opposed to all reserved within a few hours. We'll also be publishing that information on our website, and keep that clearly up to date. So this is a graph that really shows what the difference would be. What looks like the y-axis on the graph, the green line, is what is the rate at which we would anticipate the rebates being reserved if we had a reservation process, and that's based upon the reservation rate that I spoke of earlier with the last round of funding for the rental home program. So all of the rebates would be reserved within a few days. And without the reservation process and only being able to claim rebates after the installation of the heat pumps, we expect that funding to be drawn down at a much slower rate. Are there any follow-on questions to the guaranteeing funding available question?
One question in the chat that seems similar is from Scott Woodward about the estimated approval timeline. That might be in
Yeah,
the presentation if we keep going. I think we might
actually,
hold.
it's not.
Okay,
Yeah,
great.
I'll touch on that one, and then maybe we'll hold unless there's other related questions here. So there is an additional step that's involved since this is a federally funded grant. We actually have to submit to the US EPA for payment. So there's an extra step involved, and we are working to understand the implications of that timeline on the overall payment timeline. We want to try to maintain the same timelines that we've had with the rental home program, but that's a detail that we're still working through, and we certainly understand the importance of turning those funds around quickly, especially for contractors that have a number of rebates in process.
All right, thank you, Dord. Yeah, I see quite a few questions coming in. If Darcy, if you see any other clarifying questions, please let me know. If there are more substantive questions or comments, we probably want to hold those till the end.
I do have another hand up from Kyle. Did you want to take that now, Andrew?
Sure, yeah, go ahead, Kyle.
Similar question that everyone's saying in the chat. I did over 100 of these through the heat pump rental program, but we sold those based upon the guarantee that the funds were reserved. So say that we sell that and you do have a run on those installations, say that there's a large complex that, contractors do over 100, and all of a sudden the funds are, diminished as we get near the end of that. I have a hard time believing that's going to last 3 years with how quick it went last time. How can we provide any guarantee to our customers that that funding will be there?
I think there's a couple of factors to consider there. One, the size of the rebates is larger within the rental home program. They average $4,000 plus or minus. So there's a more rapid drawdown of funds there. And also to claim a rebate, the project has to start after the program start date. So you can't have a bunch of rebates that lined up that you've already done the installations for. So that whole process of doing the install and claiming the rebate and additionally lining up additional customers has to take place within following the program start date. Also, and it's not shown here, but we will be dividing funding into two tranches or two groups so that, with that first group, we'll understand how fast or how quickly those funds will be claimed. And then with that second group, we can adjust how we administer the program. One good thing about this program is it's not statute driven, so we have a lot more flexibility in how we can change how, for instance, rebates are claimed, and if necessary, we can implement a rebate reservation process before that second round of funding, so that people are not left in a lurch, at least in the first round of funding. So we have the ability to adapt as we go forward the program if that looks like it's going to be a significant problem.
Thank you, Dord. Okay, I'm going to take us back to the comparison slide. And we will finish up with that. Everyone can see my screen. And so we just touched on the $2,000 incentive amount compared to the amounts for the Oregon Rental Home Heat Pump Program. As we mentioned, this will be available for homeowners, rentals, and new construction, rather than the rental program only available for rentals and owner-occupied manufactured homes in a rented space. I did mention that one of our goals here was to greatly simplify the application process, so we will no longer require a rental agreement. That was required in the rental home program. We are no longer requiring any low to moderate income documentation. It's simply going to be a checkbox for reporting. The efficiency requirements will be HSPF 2 of 8.1 and SEER 2 of 16 for all applications, rather than different efficiency standards for different applications. And there will only be one step to receive the incentive rather than two steps, reserving and then claiming. And you will have the ability to reapply if the application is denied for any reason. I'm sure many of you know, many of the contractors that were participating in the rental home program, that the ability to amend incomplete reservations was nice, but it also got pretty confusing with all the back and forth. So this will simplify that process. And the application can only be approved or denied rather than amended and withdrawn. And there were several other ways that you could change the application, which created some confusion. And again, I'll stop right here and see if there are any other clarifying questions that we have. Do we have any raised hands, Darcy?
I do not have any raised hands as of right now.
Okay. All right. So some contractor registration requirements. This will be almost exactly like the registration for the Oregon Rental Home Heat Pump Program. The contractor will need an active CCB license and no disciplinary actions from the CCB within the last 2 years. The contractor will need to have current workers' compensation coverage and no non-complying employer orders from the Workers' Compensation Board within the last 2 years. No OSHA violations within the last 2 years, and a W-9 uploaded in the application for payment. And as I mentioned, approved Oregon Rental Home Heat Pump Program contractors will not need to reapply. We will have some training that is required for existing and new contractors before you can submit an incentive application. However, we imagine this simply being a short webinar, either participating in it or watching it later and attesting that you've done so. We implemented some additional training here just because there was quite a steep learning curve for new contractors with our fairly complicated application process for the Oregon Rental Home Heat Pump Program, and we just want to make sure that folks understand the process this time around. Some incentive application requirements. These are similar to what we have now, but simplified. We'll need the customer and project information, an invoice that includes the heat pump specs, the heat pump cost, all the incentives that are being claimed, the net cost to the customer, and the contractor and customer signature. the RE certificate, which is familiar to all of our approved contractors, the project type, whether it's homeowner, rental, or new construction, and the income type, lower moderate income, just for reporting purposes. The final inspection from the permitting agency as proof that the heat pump is associated with the project address, and a contractor attestation that all the information in the application is accurate. And so finally, some key program dates and additional information. Our goal is to open the portal for new contractor registrations on April 14th and begin accepting incentive applications on April 30th. These dates are subject to change, but those are our targets. And then the contractor training is TBD. I imagine that will be sometime in mid-April. There is additional information on the HP3 webpage. I mentioned the draft program policies. You can sign up for program updates, funding status updates. There's currently a funding status update regarding federal funding, and we will, of course, keep a running tally of the available funding on the webpage. And then there's some frequently asked questions, and we'll continue to add resources as we design and finalize the program. And so I imagine we have several more questions. So again, if you would like to ask a question, please raise your hand and then identify yourself and your organization. If you're on the phone, you can use *3 to raise your hand.
Andrew, there's quite a few questions in the chat. Maybe we can just start going down through those.
Yes, I think Kayla was also answering those.
Stuart, it might be helpful if one of us read them out loud. Would you, Andrew, would that be helpful for?
That would, yeah. Now that I stopped the presentation, I can see the chat. So
Okay, great.
so-
I go ahead, Stuart, if you know some of these have been answered and some of them haven't. There's a few questions from Lucas Ferguson, said this process would only work if you submitted the funding to the clients and not the contractor. Why was it decided as a line deduction if we can't guarantee funding?
Yeah, and I think that goes back to the previous answer, that we believe that funding will be predictable in terms of the total availability. And the only time that it will be unpredictable is really towards the very tail end of the program. And again, in terms of having funding across 2 tranches, that will also add predictability for the contractors. The other piece of that answer relative to making payments to homeowners, that adds a lot of complexity from a process perspective. And the staffing that will be available for this program is pretty thin because of the nature of the grant. So we're trying to strike that balance with the staffing that we have available, and protecting the interest of your interest as a contractor, and trying to make sure that funding is available.
Okay, thank you. There's also a few questions about the difference between this program and the Oregon Rental Home Heat Pump Program that I know have been answered in the chat, but it might be worth saying out loud for the recording. Can you talk about the Rental Home Heat Pump Program status and if that program is coming back, or is this replacing that program, and the difference between the 2 programs?
Yeah, the funding for the rental home heat pump program, as most of the contractors know, is fully reserved presently. There was not funding for that program in the governor's budget. and the legislature is in session, so we really don't know whether or not they will add funding to that program. In terms of replacing the heat pump program, the rental home heat pump program or chip dip, this program does not replace those. It's an addition. One of the reasons we're trying to stand this up relatively quickly is because we realize that there is not currently an heat pump incentive program available from the state in Oregon. And then lastly, if there is funding and those programs are reopened for applications, this rebate would be stackable with those rebates.
Okay, thank you. The next one that I see is about rebates being sent directly to property owners so that contractors is not liable for the funds. Is that an option?
Yeah, I think that's related to the question. That's something that is pretty complex for the state to do, because I think, as contractors, we require a W-9 so that we know where to transfer those funds. And if we were making payments to thousands of homeowners or building owners, it really adds a lot of complexity on Odo's side in making all those individual payments.
Okay, thank you. Kevin O'Leary asks, if we are using minor labels, how will we get final inspection proof? Must use full MEACH permit. I'm sorry, I'm not a heat pump person, so I might have said that wrong.
I think you might be referring to the mechanical permit. Was that MECH?
That makes sense. A mechanical permit is MEACH shortened. Thank you.
Yeah, we will accept minor label permits as long as we can connect the permit to the project address. So I think that there is a way to do that.
Okay. Lexi N says, is this rebate available for hybrid systems or only all electric systems?
Similar to the rental home heat pump program, hybrid systems will be eligible. However, the total cost will only be considered for the heat pump portion of the project. So that doesn't really, I don't see that being an issue with this program since it's a fixed $2,000 incentive. The total incentives cannot exceed the total heat pump purchase cost. So if you are getting a bunch of other incentives from other sources, and you're only applying it to the heat pump costs, I could see maybe the $2,000 incentive being reduced somewhat. But I don't see that happening really very often.
Jeremy Anderson from Total Comfort says, are you open to making changes to the program design based on feedback today?
Yes, definitely. There's one, and I haven't seen the question we anticipated, so I'll jump in with the question. For large projects, to where you have, say, 100 units on a project, that even more so than an individual install at a home or single rental unit is an area where contractors would be highly exposed, and also those projects take a longer period of time. So we're looking at putting in a limited reservation program for those large projects where there is a significant exposure and that would have longer timelines. So that's one that we have heard based upon the engagement that we've done to date, and are looking at adding that. And in general, yes, we are open to making program changes. We're trying to keep things as simple as possible and for everyone, but we also realize that there's a balance that we have to strike. And as I said previously, since this isn't a statute-driven program, we have more flexibility to adapt it. Again, we're trying to get the program up and running as soon as possible. So we want to, again, keep it as simple as possible, but if there are significant concerns, we will address them. I'll jump in on one from Sam Enos. He said, I thought there were, I heard 6K for rentals. I assume you mean $6,000. There are 6,000 rebates, but the rebate amount for all rebates is 2,000. So Sam, I'm not sure if that's your question or not, but please let us know if that doesn't answer your question.
Here we've
And
had a couple hands up for a while. Do you want to take some questions that way for a minute?
Sure.
All right, I've got Tim Sharp with the heat pump store. Tim, you're unmuted. Tim, did you still have a question to ask?
I guess not. Tim, you there? Is there someone else who had their hand up, Darcy? Maybe we can come back to Tim.
Yes, let's go to David. Go ahead, you're unmuted. David, did you still have a question? Last name? Bessenbacher?
Bessenbacher. Yeah.
Yes.
Hi, David Bessenbacher, RD Energy Solutions. My question is on the stacking. I know you mentioned ETO and other state incentives for public or co-op utilities getting their funding through Bonneville Power Administration. Are those stackable incentives?
I believe so, but
Yeah, they should
is
be
that
full incentives. Is Energy Trust or individual utility incentives should be stackable.
Okay. I just know you mentioned that it can't come from another federal source, and I know Bonneville Power is federally funded. So I was just making sure. Thank you.
Yeah, to our understanding, they can, but that would be a great question for Bonneville.
yeah, and I'll elaborate a little bit on that. From our perspective, it's not as big of a challenge. It's probably because of the specifics of this grant. It's more of a challenge for the federal funding on the other side of the stacking, and so that's why, in general, we're saying that in general, stacking with other federal funds is not possible. But there may be exceptions, and you really want to validate that with the other funding source.
My internet went out there for a second, so I apologize if this one was already answered, but I think it's important to answer verbally. Is how can the public find participating contractors?
Can you say that again, Sarah? Sorry, you broke up a little.
Yeah. How can the public find participating contractors if someone is interested in getting a new heat pump?
Yeah, great question. So we have the list of approved contractors on the Oregon Rental Home Heat Pump Program webpage, and we will add that to the HP3 webpage.
And there are a number of questions in the internal chat. I'm going to maybe jump over and try to address some of those.
Yeah.
There was a question about the HERE program. Esther submitted a question. Yeah, this is separate from the HERE program and the HOMES program. Those are separate federal funding, separate federally funded programs, and they each actually have their own websites. And those programs, we're targeting the end of the year for standing them up, but they are separate. And those are a couple of the federal programs that this would not be stackable with. And then there was another question. Actually, I answered both of those questions.
And if I could just take one here, there's looks like there are a few questions about low to moderate income, and that is only going to be for reporting purposes. So there's no carve out for low to moderate income. There's no additional incentive to low to moderate income, and there's no documentation required. We simply want to track that on our end. So if there will be a form on our webpage that will explain what's considered low to moderate income. And if you, the contractor, want to just ask your customer if they know if the tenant or the property is considered affordable housing or low to moderate income, then you would simply check that box.
There's a question that's from Denise Lopez saying, is the reason why funds are capped at $2,000 because someone at the state level is concerned that above this will trigger Davis-Bacon? Residential work does not trigger these requirements.
Yeah, I'll jump in on that one. So there was some internal discussion around that, but that is actually not the primary driver. One of the primary drivers is trying to, so this is part of a climate pollution reduction grant. And so we're trying to offer as many incentives as possible because the number of installed heat pumps relates to the climate pollution reduction. And so the lower rebate amount allows us to offer more incentives and get more heat pumps installed.
Thanks, Stuart. I see one here from Lucas Ferguson. Is the rental rebate program still available, or is the HP3 replacing it? So yeah, sorry if I misspoke there. The Oregon Rental Home Heat Pump Program will still be open, and so it's not replacing, or the HP3 program is not replacing the rental program. We do not know if the rental program will be extended beyond this year or funded. That's really up to the legislature to decide.
And the legislator, there will not be a final determination on that until the end of the legislative session, which is not until June. So there's no funding currently for non-tribal entities in the rental home program, and there is the question about the rental home heat pump program or the chip tip program is still yet to be determined. Okay, there's a few more questions. Does this, from Scott Woodward, does this have to be an instant incentive to our customer where it is discounted from their invoice?
Yes. So that's the way we have designed it, similar to the Oregon Rental Home Heat Pump Program and how Energy Trust works. You deduct the incentive off the total cost, and the customer is paying that cost after the incentive.
From David, for multifamily, does the invoice need to be made for the end user / tenant, or can it be invoiced to the property owner?
Yeah, so the invoice is always going to be to the owner, whether it's the homeowner or the property owner.
Gretchen says, we will always want to help our customers find the most rebate/incentives possible. This program sounds good, but possibly not as good as what might be coming with a home/here program. Any suggestions for helping customers understand/predict best options and timing?
Yeah, I'll jump on this. Yeah, the Homes and Here programs will definitely be more comprehensive in terms of the amount of funding and the funding levels for incentives. And we're currently targeting the end of this year for standing up those programs. And so with this opening towards the end of April, there'll be those 8 months in there between the two programs. So those are, that's the timeline, and that's what you can advise your customers on.
Lindsay Washburn says, is there anything else municipalities can do to support this program besides promoting it?
I think that's a great question. I think there's a great opportunity to look at aligning, any incentives that are available for municipal-owned utilities and the consumer-owned utilities as well. And I think that's a big opportunity. I know there's this information will be added to the one-stop shop when that is made available, and that'll be a good source, but making sure that all that information is in sync and that your customers and people in your municipality can get to the right information. I think that's an important thing that we can do going forward.
I see one here from Ken. Is there a time frame for contractor repayment after a complete application is submitted? Keeping it under a month will help the cash flow and program adoption. Yes, so that is part of the reason why we're simplifying the process, and our goal is to process and approve the applications in a timely way. I think 1 month is a reasonable goal. But yes, we understand that you're floating these incentives, and you'll be waiting for the funding as a contractor, so we want to speed that up as much as we can. So given our limited staffing resources, we will do our best to get those processed as quickly as possible.
Yeah, I want to also build on that. I touched on it earlier. Since the funding source for these rebates is a federal source, there's an additional process beyond the rental home or CHPTIC process that we have to go through to where we actually submit each individual project to the federal government for payment. So there is a piece in there that is going to exacerbate timelines. It's something that we're working to keep to a minimum. But as Andrew said, on our side, we've really narrowed down the approval requirements. And so that will reduce the timeline, while the federal step will add to the timeline. So we're targeting at keeping everything on the same timeline as the current rental home program.
There's one more question that I want in the chat, and then there's a few hands that have been raised that Darcy's going to unmute. But the question, just to answer, is it says the rebate is up to $2,000. How do we, if it has to be an instant rebate to the customer, but the rebate is up to $2,000, how does that work? We do not know what the actual rebate amount will be, question mark.
Yeah, I can take that one. It will be $2,000 unless the total incentives that you are claiming, including Energy Trust and others, exceeds the total heat pump purchase price. And I don't see that happening very often.
Meaning if you can somehow figure out how to install a heat pump for under $2,000, we can't give you a $2,000 heat pump. But if the heat pump is over $2,000, then the incentive will be $2,000. Is that correct?
Yeah, I said it a different way. If the cost remaining after other incentives is over $2,000, you will receive a $2,000. If it's not, we'll pay the remaining difference between the other incentives and what the total cost was.
Okay, I know we have 7 minutes left before we're trying to wrap this up. Thank you guys so much for the questions. I do want Darcy to take over and unmute some folks that have been waiting. Thank you for your patience.
Thanks, Sarah. We have a call-in user. I can only see part of the phone number. Looks like 541-500. Call-in user number 5. Did you still have a question?
Yeah, this is Rick with National Heating and Air Conditioning. Actually, the question has been answered in the chat since I had raised my hand. So I appreciate everything that you guys have said today. Thank you.
Thanks, Rick.
You're welcome.
And now I have Miranda. Miranda, you're unmuted.
Hi.
Did you still
Are
have
you
a
able to
question?
hear me?
Yes.
So are we able to collect the job cost in full and then reimburse the customer once we get funded?
That's a great question. No, that's not the way that this program is designed. It's similar to the Oregon Rental Home Heat Pump program. Unfortunately, so you will have to deduct that from the total cost of the customer and then wait for the incentive to be paid to you.
Okay, that just seems super risky on our end.
I think, we've talked about it. I think our expectation is that this funding will not just disappear, and the requirements are pretty straightforward in terms of what is required to submit and get a rebate approved. So we're anticipating that there's not going to be a high denial rate, and that the funding will not be rapidly consumed as we saw in previous heat pump programs, because there is not a reservation process. And that's really what was happening in the rental home heat pump program, is that the money was reserved. The heat pumps weren't installed and the rebates were not claimed. There are still, from last summer, there are still rebates that are being claimed that were reserved then. So that drawdown, as I'm calling it, of the funds will happen over a much slower rate and will be much more predictable for contractors.
We have 4 minutes left until 11 o'clock.
Darcy, was there anyone else on the phone?
That was the last one I have.
Okay, perfect. There is a few questions about federal funding and the federal administration change and the things that are happening in the news. I know, Duard, you had we had talked about that before, and I'm wondering if you could talk to that quickly.
Yeah, do you have a specific question or just want me to generally speak to it?
The question is how safe is the allotted $24 million from being clawed back from the current executive administration?
That's a really good question. Just so that everybody understands, for context, this is a reimbursable grant. So just like the Homes in Here grants, when the state of Oregon receives a grant, we don't get a big deposit that goes in the state of Oregon bank account. As we spend those funds and as rebates are claimed or incentives are claimed, we then submit to the federal government for that reimbursement. Currently, the funding for this for the HP3 program through the US EPA is available, and the state of Oregon is able to draw on those funds. That could change in the future, but we are closely monitoring that, and that information is posted right at the top of our website with the status of the funds. And as we go ahead, we'll continue to make that available, and we will be adding the actual total funding that has been claimed, along with what is available, and we'll be keeping that up to date.
I think there's a follow-up question from Jeremy about if Odo does not get reimbursed from the federal government, will Odo still pay the contractor?
That's a great question. I don't know that I have a specific answer to that. One of the things that we're looking to do is to minimize, by closely monitoring what's happening, is to minimize the amount of rebates that will end up in that situation. But I will follow up, Jeremy, and we'll add I'll follow up with you, but we'll also add a more definitive answer to our facts. But that is something that we as a department still have to determine.
Okay, we have 2 minutes left. I know that we haven't been able to answer everyone's questions. We're trying as hard as possible to do that today verbally. And then also we are working on getting a FAQ Q&A up on our website for this program. So there will be, that will be up with as many of these questions as possible, along with some other ones that we know that were answered in the presentation and other things as well. Is there any final thoughts or things that we see in the chat that we need in the last 60 seconds of this?
Well, sir, I'll just add that people can, there's an email address on the HP3 website, and you can submit questions to that email address as well.
Thank you so much. Can someone put the email address and project pages in the chat right now, but the email address, thank you, Kayla, for putting that in the chat.
So the email address is hp3@energy.oregon.gov. And yeah, I realize, thank you for that, Sarah. We had a very large group here, which is great. And unfortunately, we weren't able to get to all the questions, but please submit your questions or comments to that address, that email address, by 5 o'clock March 7th, which I believe is this Friday. And we will take a look at your comments and questions. We'll get back to you if you have questions, and if you have comments about, you know, how you would like the program to be designed or anything else. We will certainly take those into consideration as we continue to finalize the program design.
I think this is a perfect question to end on. Will there be another webinar for feedback or for explanation of the program when the program starts?
Yes. Well, we do plan to have a contractor training, as we mentioned. If we do receive feedback and we see demand for another public meeting, then we will certainly schedule something. So yeah, keep your eyes open for any announcements to the public distribution list that we have.
Perfect. Thank you everyone for participating. Thank you for doing the good work of installing heat pumps for Oregonians everywhere. Thank you, thank you, thank you. You make our work happen, so thank you. We appreciate it. And happy Tuesday, everyone.
Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thank you.